It was a quiet night. There were no signs of rain or anything. I had to take a flight from Florida to Houston. I grabbed my stuff and boarded the plane. I was sitting in the window seat, looking out at the dark sky. I was thinking about my upcoming trip and how excited I was to see my best friend. The plane started to taxi down the runway, and I felt my heart start to race. I was always a little bit nervous about flying, but this time I was feeling especially anxious. We took off without incident, and I started to relax a little bit. The flight was smooth, and the view from the window was amazing. A couple hours went by. We were about to land when I noticed something strange. There was another plane on the runway, but it wasn't moving. It was just sitting there, waiting to take off. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured that the other plane would just take off as soon as we landed. But then, the plane started to skid towards us. I started to get worried. I could see that the other plane was going to be too close to us when we landed. I tried to get the attention of the flight attendant, but she didn't seem to notice. The other plane kept getting closer and closer. I could see the people on the other plane, and they were looking at us in fear. I was so scared. I thought we were going to crash. I closed my eyes and waited for the impact. But then, I heard a loud noise, and the plane veered violently. I opened my eyes and saw that we had just missed the other plane by inches. I looked around in shock, and I saw that the passengers were all screaming. I was so scared that I thought I was going to be sick. The first officer came on the intercom and told us that we had just avoided a collision. He said that the other plane had been cleared to take off, but it had been delayed for some reason. The two controllers weren't in communication, so they didn't realize that we were coming in to land. The first officer said that we were going to abort the landing and circle back around, and that we would be delayed for a few hours while the FAA investigated what had happened. I was so relieved to be alive, but I was also shaken. I couldn't believe that we had come so close to crashing. I got off the plane and went to the gate, where I saw the first officer and the captain. They were both shaken up, but they were relieved that we had made it safely. The FAA investigated what had happened, and they found that the two controllers had made a mistake. They had both been distracted, and they hadn't been paying attention to the traffic. I'll never forget that day. It was the most terrifying experience of my life, but I'm so grateful that I'm alive to tell the story. I was on a plane heading into Newark for a business trip. I was sitting in the window seat, desperately looking out at the clouds and thinking about a presentation I had to deliver the next day. I was a little bit nervous, but I was also excited to be there. I had been working on this presentation for weeks, and I was finally ready to give it. I was confident that it was going to be a success. I had never given a presentation to this group of people before, and I didn't want to make a fool of myself. The plane was full, but I didn't mind. I was actually glad that there were so many people on board. It made me feel safer. We had been in the air for about an hour, and everything was calm. There was no turbulence, and I felt like this flight was going to be a quiet one. I was looking through the window thinking about the day ahead, when suddenly, I heard a commotion. I turned around and saw that the guy in the aisle seat was having a seizure. I didn't know what to do, so I just watched as he started to convulse. A few other passengers jumped to his aid, and I decided to help as well. We got him out of the seat and laid him down on the aisle. I quickly remembered a video I saw about first response and how to treat a seizure, but in a moment of shock, I couldn't react and was afraid I wasn't going to do it right. I had never seen someone have a seizure before, and I didn't know what to expect. I was afraid that if I did something wrong, I could make things worse. I remembered the video saying to turn the person on their side and clear their airway, but I was afraid that if I moved him, I could hurt him. I was about to ask the other passengers if they knew what to do when two other passengers came to help. An ex-soldier and a nurse were luckily flying with us. They were both very calm and collected, and they knew exactly what they were doing. They quickly turned the guy on his side and cleared his airway. Then the ex-soldier started doing CPR, while the nurse gave him mouth-to-mouth. The guy's heart stopped, and he didn't breathe for about 5 minutes before they were able to bring him back. One flight attendant was totally freaked. The other was amazing. She was calm and collected, and she did everything she could to help. When she had to get around the mass of people, she contacted the captain. This was the fastest I've ever gotten into Newark. We were definitely close to the highest speed allowed for a commercial plane, and we had a straight-in approach. We didn't hit a gate. The EMS met us just off the runway and came up the stairs to get him boarded and off. We stabilized him as best we could in the aisle for landing. Only time I've ever landed in a plane without a seatbelt. It was an intense and totally amazing outcome. I really thought we were going to be supporting a dead body during landing for a while. There were some heroes on that flight, and that guy lived because of it. I felt totally unprepared and was glad those people were there. It made me go out and re-up my CPR certifications and practice. I'll never forget that day. It was the most terrifying and amazing experience of my life. I was a flight attendant for a regional airline. I used to work on Embraer 145S. These planes are fairly small and cramped, so my jump seat was right against the wall separating the flight deck. This meant that I could often hear things happening in there, most commonly audible warnings from the plane. I eventually learned not to be too concerned when I heard things like glide slope or wind shear. But one night, everything changed. I was flying from Denver to Durango, and it was a late flight. The weather was clear, but the mountains were close, and I knew that turbulence was always a possibility. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. About 15 minutes into the flight, the turbulence suddenly got much worse. The plane was bouncing so hard that I was sure we were going to bounce into a mountain. I could hear the pilots shouting in the cockpit, and I could see the lights flickering. I knew that this was serious, so I told the passengers to get up under no circumstances, strap in, and enjoy the ride. The turbulence continued to get worse, and I was starting to panic. I could hear the plane creaking and groaning, and I was sure that it was going to break apart. At one point, there was a rapid series of dings, and then the plane lurched sideways. I felt like I was going to be sick, and I could hear people screaming and crying. I thought to myself, this is it. This is how I die. But then, just as suddenly as it started, the turbulence stopped. The plane leveled out, and the lights stopped flickering. I looked around, and I saw that the passengers were just as shaken as I was. Some of them were crying, and others were just staring blankly into space. The pilots came on the intercom and told us that we had experienced a severe bout of turbulence, and that the autopilot had been knocked out. They said that we would be landing in Durango shortly, and that we should all stay seated until the plane had come to a complete stop. We landed safely in Durango, and everyone was able to get off the plane. I was so relieved to be alive, and I thanked the pilots for their quick thinking. We spent an hour at the airport logging all of the maintenance issues, and then we were able to continue on our journey. I'll never forget that night. It was the closest I've ever come to death, and it's a reminder that even the most routine flights can turn dangerous in an instant. Thanks for watching.